Hey everyone, and welcome to Southdown Garage. Let us do a quick recap on the G35 so far. We bought a G that just needed a transmission. Unfortunately, it also needed a new body due to a whole lot of frame rot that made it impossible to ignore. The car known as Scam G was stripped of everything. Because we just so happened to have a spare car that was in better shape, minus the front end, the banged up door, the interior that looked like a nightclub at 4 a.m., and the missing engine. We went to work on freshening up the engine and got rid of all the oil leaks. Then my good buddy Tyler started trying to convince me that I should do a 6-speed swap instead of putting the automatic in. After he found a 6-speed with flywheel, slave cylinder, and pedals at a price I couldn't refuse, it leads us to today's video. We're starting a 6-speed swap on the project now known as UGG by installing this high quality precision clutch, or at least the second cheapest clutch on Rock Auto. Let's get to work. First, start by making sure the pilot bearing fits over the input shaft of the transmission. Next, if you're using an engine from a car that came with an automatic, you'll have to remove the spacer in the crank before you can install the pilot bearing. Make sure to pack the area behind the spacer with lots of grease, and I used a socket that barely fits so it'll be easier to force the spacer out with hydraulic pressure. The right hammer also helps.
Just need a real hammer. That's right. Oh, this is really messed up.
Make sure the socket you use is slightly larger outside diameter than the pilot bearing. Start by gently tapping the bearing into place. Once in place, drive it in using the socket. Having a slightly larger socket will ensure that you don't install the bearing too far into the crank. Remember, you'll have to remove it one day, and you'll need to use the same trick that we just used in removing the spacer with grease, which requires some area behind the bearing or bushing to help push it out. This next step is extremely important. If done incorrectly, this will mean the engine will not start. First, you want to make sure that the dowel pin is lined up with the flywheel to the crank. This dowel pin is designed to line up the flywheel exactly where it needs to be on the crank for the crank sensor to pick up when the engine is at top dead center on the flywheel gear teeth. Again, the engine will not start if this step is overlooked. Install the flywheel. You can give it a little help by lightly tapping it into place with a rubber mallet. Make sure to put Loctite on the bolts and use a ratchet to cinch up the bolts. Absolutely do not use an impact on an engine with dowel pin crank. Once cinched up, make sure something is in place to hold the crank still, such as a breaker bar on the front pulley, or in this case I'm using a tool that holds the teeth of the flywheel. Then you can set your torque wrench to 64 foot-pounds and torque down the crank bolts. Okay guys, so we've got our trusty clutch alignment tool that came with our precision clutch here. Now, the biggest thing we want to make sure is that we don't have anything in there really. We want to be able to make sure that we can slide this alignment tool straight in. And we want to make sure it's straight, so like not like this, not up and down. Okay, so we want to line it up straight, because if we don't, we're gonna hate ourselves afterwards. You do not want to hate yourself. So this is when you're mounting up the clutch. This is your flywheel side, and this will be your pressure plate side, or which is this being pressure plate, because there's the forks here. You'll see that when I take it apart. So let's use this lovely X-Acto. Also, make sure that you have your flywheel resurfaced or you get a new one. Oh, see, you should probably put this on like this. Okay, so that's in place now. These pressure plates, I would recommend hitting with a little bit of brake clean, as I'm sure they've got some sort of something on here. Hit that with brake clean, get that first layer of gunk off, because you don't want that. You don't want it at all. So now we're gonna line up these dowels here. Oh, it's just plastic. Okay. So that is on there a little bit. We've got our ARP bolts because this clutch never came with anything. So we're just gonna, the part number here is 102-2201. If you are working on these cars and you're like me, you're doing a 6-speed swap, it's really hard to get everything. And honestly, thank you, Tyler, to finding it online. He's really good about finding me things I should buy. Thanks, Tyler. Chelsea says thank you too. Make sure the new ARP pressure plate bolts get red Loctite. It is installed using a ratchet moving in a star pattern until the very end, when it's acceptable to move in a complete circle to ensure all bolts have seated. Make sure that you're frequently checking your clutch alignment tool that it moves in and out freely as you're doing this tightening. Set your torque wrench to 11 foot-pounds and do your initial torque. Next, set your torque wrench to 29 foot-pounds and complete the torque again in a star pattern. I cannot believe we're missing another piece. Are you kidding me? Imagine slamming your hand in the door multiple times. That's the level of frustration I had at this very moment. But then Nissan came to the rescue. Okay, so after talking with Nissan, after my little meltdown there, you can't do this to me.
No!
I'm an engineer.
Please, no!
They had the clip and they had that bearing piece.
Got him! Got him!
So this is the other piece, so we're gonna go and press that on right now. The last thing to do is press a new bearing onto the collar that we had to purchase from Nissan, as it did not come with a swap. These are all important parts that you should make sure you have so that you can complete the work. Special thanks to Mertin, Nissan, and Chilliwack for bailing me out. What's that, like 3 times? Ugh, who's counting? Now we can install the release bearing and collar onto the fork and into the transmission. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Feel free to share the video. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to get more content. And make sure you let us know how we did in the comments below. Until next time, hope you guys are having a good day. Take care.